we think of ancient Greek governments, it is likely that we think of Athens, the birthplace of democracy and Western civilization. However, what if I told you that one city had democratic elements way before Athens? And what if I told you that city-state was actually Sparta? Sparta was a truly fascinating place, which intricacies are too commonly overlooked. Today we're going to merely scratch the surface on how Sparta operated, from its distinct class system to its interesting and unique way of government. Hi, my name's Adam, I'm an ancient Greek reenactor and history enthusiast, and I invite you to please join me today as we look at a commonly overlooked part of ancient Greek history, Spartan government. Now, Sparta is far too a complex city to cover in just one video, so consider this a sort of crash course where we cover all of the main points to give you a decent idea of how Sparta functioned. Now, when we are talking about Sparta, most people are actually talking about the entire region of Laconia, which Sparta was the capital city of. In ancient sources, it seems that they actually use the term Lacedaemonians more so than Spartans. Sparta controlled many surrounding territories and actually had one of the largest territories in Greece. Early on in its development, Sparta conquered the neighbouring region of Messenia, expanding its borders and establishing it as an early military power. So when we talk about Sparta, we're actually usually talking about the entire region that Sparta controlled, not just the city itself. To truly understand Sparta, we first must understand its people and how they contributed to the foundation of the city-state. Sparta had a distinct social class system made up of three main classes. At the top were the true Spartan citizens, called the homoioi, or translated as equals. These were born of a homoioi mother and father and lived in the city of Sparta itself. Only the homoioi were truly recognised as citizens and were the upper class of Spartan society. This gave them certain privileges which were not issued to other residents of the Spartan territories, such as voting power, running for office, and more. All male homoioi had to serve in the Spartan army and went through the Spartan education system, which I actually did an entire video on, which I'll link down below if you're interested in that. The second main class of Spartan society were called the perioikoi. These were mainly made up of merchants and craftsmen and were essentially the middle working class of Spartan society. Although they were not citizens of Sparta, they were quite well respected and valued within Spartan society. They too were expected to serve in the Spartan army, however they would have been more akin to the hoplites of other city-states, being a citizen militia who worked normal jobs outside of their military service. At the bottom of Spartan society, we have the helots, a working servant class. There is still quite an active discussion about whether the helots should be treated as slaves or not, and it would seem that throughout Spartan development, their treatment would change dramatically. They seem to go from early on well-treated serfs, changing into cold slaves. However, again, this is far too complicated a subject to squeeze into this one video. The main role of the helots were to work their homoioi's estates, and as payment for that, they were essentially allowed to keep a portion of their crop. They lived in their own homes with their own families in the surrounding towns of Sparta, and would even occasionally fight alongside their homoioi masters in certain occasions, and it's also important to note that they vastly outnumbered the homoioi population as well. Kingship in Sparta is yet another aspect which made them entirely unique. Sparta was not a monarchy, but a diarchy, meaning that it had two kings, the bloodlines of the Aegeads and the Eurypontids. The legend for this dual king setup is said to go all the way back to Sparta's first king, Aristomachus, who died before his wife gave birth to twins. The state did not know which son to crown, so they made them both kings. Although quite a cool explanation, it is highly likely that this is a myth. Instead, perhaps there were two founding families of Sparta, the Aegeads and the Eurypontids, but we don't actually know for sure how the two kings originated. Unlike in other city-states, the Spartan kings were not absolute monarchs. Instead, their main role was actually as a military commander. However, each king was also a high priest to the god Zeus. The kings could not declare war or even gather their army on their own. This was the role of the elected ephors, literally meaning overseers. On each campaign, two ephors accompanied the kings to keep an eye on them. The kings could be exiled, fined, and deposed, and had to swear a monthly oath. As long as they kept their oath, they would preserve their kingship. This really shows how precarious kingship in Sparta really was. Although famed for its military might and military power, Sparta's governmental structures were also incredibly unique and fascinating and far too commonly overlooked in favour for Athens. Sparta resembled an oligarchy in the sense that it had a small ruling council called the Grossia, translated to elders. This ruling council was made of 28 men over the age of 60 who were elected, as well as the 2 kings. Although this may seem quite diplomatic, the way that they were elected seems, let's just say, unusual. Aristotle would actually use the term childish to describe it. One citizen was shut in a room with a writing tablet, and as each candidate was brought forward, would record how loud the acclamation was for that candidate. The candidate that had the loudest acclamation, the loudest cheer, won. Herodotus tells us that in the case of the kings being absent, their nearest family member or nearest kin could cast a proxy vote in their place as well. Perhaps what is not associated with Sparta is the practice of democracy, which was present in citizen assemblies called the ecclesia. The ecclesia saw Spartiates vote for bills put forward by the council, and this process was called the propoliesis, meaning previous deliberation. Now, citizens could not amend bills, they mainly acted as the stamp. Now again, this seemingly democratic way of passing bills was also passed by who could shout the loudest. But shouting was not the only way of decision making. It is accounted that sometimes the ephors would ask each citizen to move into groups, and they would count to see which group was the largest. It's likely that this probably happened more so than the yelling, for unless it was so obvious that one side was louder than the other, it would be so evenly split that counting probably actually took place more so than shouting. As you can imagine, if you're decently 50-50 split, deciphering sound would be very, very difficult. As for the ephors, or the elders themselves, it would seem that they were made up of all kinds of the social spectrum, which made it possible on rare occasion for certain poorer ephors to be easily bribed. With the election of the ephors being an annual occasion and that repeated office was unlawful, it is likely that many, if not all Spartiates served on the council at one point, especially as citizen numbers began to decline. So there we go, Spartan government and societal foundations in a more summarised video for you. I hope that you enjoyed this and learnt something about Sparta, and it is really interesting to sort of see these democratic elements which actually came in over 100 years before Athenian direct democracy was put in place, and how Sparta sort of functioned as an oligarchic, diarchy, semi-democratic city-state. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.